Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to watch the video. Always much appreciated you guys do that. And today we are going to have a conversation in length over line size, the right size of line to use in different situations. I'm going to give you guys my opinion on it. I've always been a stickler as far as getting just the right line size, matching the right line size for efficiency and more bites and getting the fish in. And I'll sort of give you guys my 2 cents worth on it, what I've learned over the past 50 some years of fishing about it. Real quick before we get started here, just our weekly reminder, if anybody's out there interested in supporting this channel a little bit more, one of the best ways you can do it is to become a member of the channel. Just go to the my YouTube homepage, click on the About section and go to Intuitive Memberships, and stuff like extra videos every week that aren't seen by the public, access to my personal email address. It's a great way to help out here if you guys are wanting to do something like a Patreon deal, but get a little bit more of a perk with it than that. So much appreciated. Okay, let's get into this line size deal. Man, there's a lot to this. This is something that's not as simple as it seems, because there's a lot of different variables to consider with line size. I want to break this up into sort of specific categories and techniques a little bit and sort of let you know what I'm thinking here. So I'm going to start out, let's start out with light and go heavy. Light line, for the most part, you're going to be using it on a spinning rod. And in my situation, I think realistically that most people are using anywhere between that 6 to 12 pound test line on a spinning rod. That's sort of like and I'm talking about fluorocarbon line, max on there. I'm not going to go into braid to fluorocarbon because you guys know I don't use braid to fluorocarbon on my spinning reels. We've talked about that in detail. I don't think it's a good idea. It doesn't get you any more bites. I think braid to fluorocarbon is sort of like, everybody's hopped on this train. It's sort of like the girls did back in the 70s, with those high-waisted jeans, and it's sort of making a comeback now. Those high-waisted jeans were like the ugliest, they are the ugliest jeans a girl could possibly wear, but everybody started wearing them because it was just a trend. And I think that's the same with the braid to fluorocarbon. So I'll save that for another deal. I will talk though some about just straight braid, but not the braid to fluorocarbon. Okay, 6 to 12 pound test line we're talking about. For the 6 pound test line, you're talking about situations where you're dealing with open water situations and normally a little bit clearer situations. This is going to be something for like your Ned rigs, small shaky heads, small swim baits, possibly some small crankbaits, and jerk baits. I use 6 pound test a lot on jerk baits, but the 6 pound test is going to be, open water application where you don't really stand much of a chance of the bass wrapping you up, and you need that lighter line for a combination of visibility or lack of visibility to the fish, casting distance, and getting that bait down to a maximum depth that allow it to look right in the water. When I move up to 8 pound test line, a lot of times I'm still doing the same situations. This is the little crankbaits, jerk baits, shaky heads a little bit more, still some Ned rigs on a heavier head, maybe some wacky rigs, stuff like that. And you can, in the 8 pound test, I'm getting a little bit more, maybe fishing in a little bit more off-colored water, but I'm still not fishing it around a lot of cover. I'm fishing it around pretty much open water areas, although I will cast a shaky head or something like that around docks. But it gives me a little bit more power, yet the invisibility with that. The times that I go up to the 10 and 12 pound test line, specifically on spinning rigs, are with techniques that I'm not casting a long way with the spinning rig. It's something like a wacky rig again, or maybe a shaky head on a little bit heavier head, and sometimes a jerk bait if I don't want it to get very deep. 10 pound test line on a spinning rod will allow you to, or 10 and 12 pound both, will allow you to fish, a little bit dirtier and heavier cover water. You can actually start fishing around maybe some wood targets where you've got the power with 10 to 12 pound test line to turn a fish away from that wood. And that's when I use it with that. But the only other time that I'll use, braids, as far as a straight braid on a spinning rod, is when I'm fishing something like a floating worm, or maybe some type of fluke. Sometimes I'll use straight 15 pound test braid if I'm fishing a fluke real fast on the surface, or if I'm fishing a floating worm on the surface. And sometimes I'll even go up to 20-pound test braid on a spinning rod if I'm fishing like a little 1/8 ounce buzzer, something like that. Okay, that's spinning. Bait casting will start the same too. I don't ever use anything under 10-pound test on a bait caster. If I'm using under 10-pound test, I'm fishing it on a spinning rod. If I'm using 10-pound test, let's say 10 and 12-pound test on a bait caster, again, this is fluorocarbon. I use Seagar and Vizex fluorocarbon all the time. So those bait categories that I'm fishing, 10 and 12-pound test line, these are primarily going to be crankbaits. You know, if I'm fishing something that requires a slow bait, that requires a 10-pound line, lighter line like that, I'm usually fishing it on a spinning rod. So 10 and 12-pound test line, to me, when I'm using it, it's all about crankbaits. It's flat-sided crankbaits. Could be, you know, something like a Wigglewort, Mega Bass, you know, Z2, something like that. Something that it allows me to fish, maximize the depth of the crankbait, yet it gives me the power with that 10 and 12-pound test line, where if I get it across rocks or something, I'm not going to nick it up too bad. I can have enough power to pull those fish away from it. Now, the 15-pound test line, when I go to 15-pound test, this is when I'm getting more, let's say 15 and 17-pound test. This is when I'm getting in a little bit more diversity of techniques. For me, 15 and 17-pound test, I'm doing a lot of stuff like casting Texas rig worms, casting, you know, maybe some finesse jigs or a little bit larger jigs, casting jigs, football head jigs, larger swim baits, you know, a little bit bigger crankbaits. Sometimes I'll throw a, you know, like a deep diving crankbait on a 15 to 17-pound test line, sometimes a square bill crankbait on 15 to 17. Most of the time, that is what that's relegated to. Also, I'll throw, you know, 15, 17-pound test line monofilament for topwaters. That's a real good choice there. 15 to 17-pound test line, you're starting to get up into those line tests where you can actually start penetrating thicker cover. You can pitch and flip underneath docks. You can even pitch and flip some laydowns. You can pitch and flip, you know, some reeds or something like that. 15 and 17 gives you enough power to actually set the hook hard on a single hook lure and bear down enough pressure to pull those fish away from targets and objects. So you're starting to get into that category a little bit. The next category would be that 20 to 25-pound test range. Now, 20 to 25-pound test is my workhorse line for all of my pitching and flipping techniques. Big spinner baits, like 3/4 ounce spinner bait, something like that. A-rigs, you know, maybe sometimes a big square bill crankbait, maybe something like a big swim bait or a glide bait, something like that. This is when I need maximum power. This is when and I'm going to talk a little bit about heavier braid, straight braid, but this is when I want maximum power and low visibility. So this is, like I said, I use this heavily pitching and flipping around most every object. It can be wood, you know, rock, docks, you know, lily pads, whatever like that. It gives me the ability to set the hook as hard as I want and pressure that fish is about as hard as I want. And also it gives me the ability, I can use that 20, 25-pound test line on a heavy rod, so I can move a big bait, like a big 1 ounce spinner bait or a glide bait or something. I can move it hard on a heavy rod and not break the line. The last category I'm fishing as far as my lines are the heavy braids. This is like the 50 and 65-pound test braid. I don't use 65 much, I use 50 most of the time. And most of the time when I'm using braid, it's one of two techniques. It's either a frog or it's pitching and flipping mats with a big sinker, like a 1 ounce sinker, flooded, you know, grass mats, that type of stuff. That's about the only time I'll use that heavy line with that. So anyway, guys, that's just sort of a foundation. That's what I found that works best for me. I think that gives you a good starting point to branch away from. It's all about having a combination of going as light as you can to increase not only the amount of strikes, but to get the bait to work right. It's about getting the depth out of the lure to the maximum or the minimum depth. Sometimes you don't want to, sometimes you want to use heavy line because maybe you don't want a square bill crankbait to run very deep. So it's about learning to maximize the efficiency of depth And also it's about, on a slow bait, it's about the rate of the fall, because if you're using a jig or a plastic worm creature bait or something like that, the diameter and the size of the line will directly affect how fast that bait falls. So there's a lot of different things to consider with that, but hopefully that gives you guys sort of a starting point with it. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the tip. If you like it, please hit that subscribe button. That'd be much appreciated, and we'll see y'all later.